The scream echoed through the sterile corridors of the Tarshan research vessel like a sonic bolt, ricocheting off titanium walls and sending a dozen species into high alert protocols. Commander Vril, a tall, aquamarine-skinned Tarshan with a rigid posture and a fondness for order, halted mid-stride outside the observation bay. The scream had come from within. He input his code. The door hissed open. Inside, a single human writhed on the floor, clutching his mouth, eyes watering, face flushed red like a solar flare. The other researchers, 3 Zalari, 1 Vorton, and a jittery Owen stood frozen, uncertain whether to administer aid or flee. "Parker, are you injured?" Vril stepped forward, scanning the human with his ocular sensors. "Is it neurological trauma? Internal hemorrhaging?" Parker Lanson thrashed once more, then crawled to the nearest sink-like apparatus and shoved his head under the stream of recycled water. "Oh God," he gasped. "Oh God, it burns. My tongue is dying. I'm dying." "This is the end. Begin emergency biostasis," Vril ordered toward the nearby Vorton, who had already raised a containment pod from the floor. No, wait," Parker managed between gulps of water. "It's not no stasis, just hot sauce." Silence fell. Vril's upper eyelid twitched. "Repeat," he said. Parker leaned on the counter, panting. "Hot sauce. From Earth. It's food. Kind of. A condiment. I put it on the protein rations." "Bad idea. Extremely bad idea." The Owen, who had been vibrating with panic, let out a confused whimper. "You screamed as if you were under attack," Vril said, his tone flat. "You sounded like you were being eviscerated." "I thought I was," Parker muttered. "But no, just regret." He reached into the small storage cubby behind him and pulled out a tiny red bottle. The label read, Hellmouth 13, Carolina Reaper Blend Small Batch, handcrafted. Vril took it gently, held it up to the light, and then turned to the rest of the room. "Stand down. Threat is non-lethal. Apparently this is culinary." The Ewan collapsed into a heap, sighing. The Zalari returned to their data terminals, muttering in their own language. The Vorton lowered the stasis pod back into the floor. Parker slumped into a chair and wiped his eyes. "I thought it'd be a fun change. Liven up the rations a bit. Didn't expect to taste the sun exploding." Vril lowered himself into a seat across from him. "You were invisible agony." "I was. From voluntarily ingesting the substance." Parker nodded. "It's a human thing. Some of us like it spicy." "That was not spice. That was chemical warfare." "Close enough." Vril tilted his head. "You ingested it for pleasure?" Parker hesitated. "That was the plan going in. Didn't work out. But yeah, some people love it." Vril leaned back in his seat, processing. "We intercepted the scream on 3 decks. Shipwide alert was triggered. Wow. We nearly contacted Central Command to report a biological breach. Sorry about that." Vril stared at the tiny bottle, then at Parker. "I will need a full report. This sauce. I must understand." 2 hours later, Parker stood in the briefing room, a digital display behind him showing a chart labeled Scoville Heat Unit's Human Tolerance Spectrum. Half the science staff had shown up. "So," Parker began, "back on Earth, we have this need to challenge ourselves. Physically, mentally, and sometimes culinarily. Spicy food is one of those things. It creates a burning sensation, sure, but it also releases endorphins. Makes you feel good in a weird way, though obviously not always." He gestured toward the chart. "This little number, Hellmouth 13, clocks in at about 2 million Scoville units. That's a lot, especially when you're stuck with ration protein bricks your 3rd straight month." A Zalari raised a hand like appendage. "You consume this substance for stimulation, despite its obvious danger." "Yeah. Some people even enter contests to eat peppers way hotter than this. It's kind of a sport." Vril, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You screamed as though you were dying. I thought I was. And yet you classify this as food. Technically, it's edible." "Barely." The room was still for a moment. Then the Vorton stepped forward. We request a sample for controlled testing. Be my guest, Parker said, sliding the bottle across the table. The warden collected it with a pair of tongs and placed it into a sealed container. Vril turned to Parker. You are forbidden from consuming further hostile condiments without medical supervision. Fair. 3 days later, the scientists had begun running tests on the hot sauce. The warden constructed a sealed simulation chamber with synthetic sensory nodes to mimic the human tongue. The results were conclusive. The sauce caused a pain response similar to mild electrical burns. Parker watched from the observation window as the chamber's internal temperature monitor spiked. You could weaponize that, the Zalari murmured. Already have, Parker replied. On Earth, we have pepper spray. Similar compounds. Used for crowd control. Vril frowned. And yet, you ingest it willingly. Free country. That evening, Parker returned to his quarters, only to find Vril waiting outside. You are invited to the cultural exchange dinner, the commander said. Bring a sample of your cuisine. Parker hesitated. You sure? It is approved. We wish to understand more about your species. Thresholds. Back in the mess hall, Parker prepared a small batch of chili using a blend of rations and a microscopic amount of the hellmouth sauce. He served it with a warning sign etched onto the table. Vril took one bite. He didn't scream. Instead, his eyes widened, his posture stiffened, and he slowly reached for the nearest liquid. Water won't help, Parker said. Try this milk substitute. It's got fat content. Vril drank. His breathing steadied. Your species, he said slowly, seeks pain. For flavor. Sometimes. Not always. But yeah, we like to push boundaries. I am beginning to understand Earth's history more clearly. Parker chuckled, stirring his own bowl. Hot sauce isn't the weirdest thing we do. Not even close. Vril looked at the remaining sauce bottle on the table like it was a volatile explosive. You screamed, he said again. And it was from this. Yeah. Vril nodded once. Then I pity your enemies. Over the next week, the incident made its way up the Tarshan diplomatic chain. The scream, originally logged as a possible human casualty, had now become a case study in Earth culinary practices. A new directive was issued. All non-human personnel are to avoid unsupervised interaction with Earth-based condiments unless appropriate hazard analysis has been conducted. Parker found his scream was now part of a training simulation. New recruits were shown the footage to emphasize the importance of species-specific nutritional understanding. He didn't mind. He got a small bonus for contributing to interspecies cooperation, and a second bottle of Hellmouth 13, which he hid. The Tarshan medical wing had never been intended for culinary experiments, and yet, by late cycle the next day, the entire left side of the diagnostics lab had been quietly repurposed with a hastily installed human-compatible digestion simulator, 2 containment drones, and a refrigeration unit that now held nothing but sauces retrieved from Parker's quarters under security escort. Vril stood beside the analysis console, arms folded behind his back, observing a stream of biochemical data scrolling across the wall. His second officer, a pale-skinned Rutari named Nor, kept glancing between the readouts and Parker, who was seated nearby on a padded bench chewing on a salt tablet and looking none too pleased. You said this one is milder, Nor said, holding up a bottle with a cheerful yellow label that depicted a cartoon fruit on fire. Yeah, that's mango habanero, Parker replied. Still got bite, but it's mostly for flavor. We are attempting to determine the point at which the human pain receptors activate, Nor continued. Your previous selection surpassed our measurement range. I noticed. Vril tapped a control. A chamber sealed with a hiss and a synthetic digestive tract began processing a diluted sample of the new sauce. Sensors embedded in the artificial tissue glowed faintly. We've isolated 3 compounds that your species appears uniquely sensitive to, Vril said. They do not cause cellular damage, yet they trigger emergency signals across multiple systems. Capsaicin, Parker said. That's the main one. The others are probably capsiate and dihydrocapsaicin. All variations on the same basic molecule. Nor blinked. You are not a medical officer. Nope. Just lived through enough poor decisions to have learned a thing or two. A faint alarm chirped from the chamber. Nor leaned forward. Simulated epiglottal spasms. Increased heart rate. Core temperature elevation, he read aloud. Fascinating. All without harm. Parker took another salt tablet. That's why it's popular. Terrifies your body but doesn't kill you. Vril turned. You said this one was milder. It is, Parker said. Compared to the last one, it's like getting a warm handshake from a fruit basket. Vril stared at him for a long moment, then turned back to the readouts. The door opened with a soft pulse. A small delegation entered, 3 Varnaxi, their elongated necks swaying as they moved, and a single Sheltari, furred and feline, whom Parker recognized as Dr. Lessa. She had been the one to first diagnose his culinary-induced trauma 20 hours earlier. We have questions, Lessa announced, moving closer. The Council of Dietary Coherence has requested a full profile on your planet's ingestible hazards. I'm not sure you can call hot sauce a hazard, Parker said. You screamed so loud it triggered a war protocol, Lessa replied. It qualifies. The Varnaxi closest to her extended a thin digit toward the fridge. Why would a species with access to thermal regulation and nutritional abundance engage in self-inflicted sensory aggression? Parker scratched his jaw. Because it's not about survival anymore. We eat for experience, complexity, challenge, sometimes for bragging rights. You ever try to impress a room full of people with your ability to digest lava? The 3 Varnaxi exchanged glances. No, the tallest said. That would be lethal. Exactly. Lessa slid a screen in front of Parker. This chart suggests your species has developed regional subcultures centered entirely around increasing pain thresholds through food intake. Is that correct? Spicy food competitions, Parker nodded. Some folks train for months. Build tolerance. Sweat. Cry. Vomit. And go back the next day for another round. It's practically a ritual. Does this correlate with social status? Lessa asked. In some circles, yeah. Being able to eat the hottest thing on the menu gets you respect. Sometimes a t-shirt. One of the Varnaxi tilted her head. You receive garments for surviving exposure? Sometimes a hat, too. We have initiated a study into potential applications for your species' neural pain tolerance. Vril added. If voluntarily ingesting a substance that simulates tissue damage results in pleasure, this may have implications for neural adaptation. It's not the pain that brings pleasure, Parker said. It's overcoming it, knowing you can take it. It's the gap between I can't and I did. Lessa stepped back, folding her arms. Your biology is not the only thing we are studying now. Time passed. By mid-cycle, the medical wing had become unexpectedly popular. Vril authorized a rotation system for observers, and Parker found himself explaining human spice tolerance to a rotating cast of fascinated aliens. Each group brought new questions, rarely about the sauce itself. Do you consider suffering a recreational activity? Asked a curious Vril technician. Depends on the context, Parker shrugged. We run marathons, sit through long meetings, raise children. Pain's just part of the deal. The technician blinked both sets of eyes. Your species is deeply confusing. By late evening, Parker was finally allowed to leave. He stepped into the corridor, rubbing his temples, only to find Vril already waiting outside. Walk with me. They moved in silence for a stretch, the corridor lights low in standby mode. A maintenance drone zipped past, humming softly. The council will convene tomorrow, Vril said. They've requested your presence. Because of hot sauce? Because of what it suggests. Parker glanced sideways. Which is that your species cannot be accurately modeled using standard cognitive frameworks. You display behaviors that are not aligned with preservation, yet are not pathological. It unsettles our algorithms. Good. Vril stopped. Why? Because it means we're more than just a set of predictable inputs. You can't run a spreadsheet and guess what we'll do next. Sometimes we scream because our mouths are on fire. Sometimes we laugh while we're crying. Sometimes we build things that serve no function except to make us feel something. Vril looked genuinely thoughtful. Parker stretched. You want to understand humans? Don't just study what we eat. Look at why we choose the hard path. We don't do it because it's sensible. We do it because we can. The next morning, Parker stood before the Council of Dietary Coherence. The chamber was circular with tiered seating occupied by representatives from over a dozen species. A projection of a human tongue rotated slowly in the center, annotated with chemical sensitivity markers. The sauce bottle sat on a pedestal beside it like a sacred relic. Lessa stood beside him, presenting the findings. When she finished, the room fell quiet. The eldest counselor, a translucent being known as Velen, leaned forward. "Human Parker, we have reviewed your records. You are not a trained biologist nor a culinary professional. Correct. Yet you wield knowledge of complex neural responses and cultural dietary patterns. I've made a lot of mistakes in the kitchen." Velen's form rippled slightly. "Your species weaponizes flavor. Not for conquest. For entertainment. Sounds accurate. And you endure this willingly." Parker nodded. The council conferred silently. Then Velen turned back. "You are hereby appointed cultural intake consultant to the Interstellar Nutrition Alliance. Your duties will include the explanation, supervision, and containment of human culinary phenomena." Parker blinked. "Wait, does that come with a raise? For additional energy credits per cycle and hazard pay?" He grinned. "Then I accept." As he left the chamber, Parker passed Vril in the corridor. "Congrats," Vril said. "I think I just got promoted for nearly dying of lunch. Your scream was effective. It captured attention. I'll try to scream more strategically next time." Vril paused. "We're still analyzing the mango habanero sample. It's proving unpredictable." Parker clapped him on the shoulder. "Wait till you get to Ghost Pepper?" Vril didn't ask. He just kept walking. And Parker, now officially an interstellar food consultant, began drafting a report titled Human Cuisine, a series of terrible ideas with delicious results. Parker sat on the edge of the alloy stool in Lab Sector D14, watching a pale green fluid bubble at the bottom of a containment beaker. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something that might have been burned sugar. "Across the workbench, Dr." Lessa adjusted her filtration mask and tapped a sequence into the interface console. "Your digestive tract is absurd," she said flatly, not looking up. "It permits corrosion levels we typically associate with industrial solvent tolerance. Glad to know I'm basically a walking refinery. You have 2 meters of small intestine capable of nutrient absorption even under duress. That's not efficiency. That's stubbornness made biological." Parker swirled the mug in his hand. It was filled with a thick, beige nutrient slurry the ship systems had generated for him after all his personal rations were confiscated for full cataloging. He took a sip. "I miss chewing." Lessa finally looked up. "You realize there are over 7,000 cataloged edible plants on Earth. You chose to bring weaponized sauce and dried meat. I didn't think I'd be here long enough for a buffet. You brought 5 separate varieties of thermal irritants. That's restraint, actually." The console pinged. Lessa leaned over, scanning the data. "The mucous membrane analog is showing signs of cellular adaptation. That's the 4th test in a row. It's starting to tolerate exposure. It's learning." "No," she said. "It's mimicking a human reaction. That's not learning. That's biochemical defiance." He grinned. "Sounds about right." She typed in another sequence, then stood back. "We'll begin the final trial in 10 minutes. If this batch doesn't destabilize the artificial esophageal lining, we'll conclude the study." Parker took another sip of his slurry. "So what happens after this?" "I go back to mopping floors. You're listed as a cultural specialist now, which means you'll be asked to explain other behaviors your species exhibits that don't conform to logic." He set the mug down. "You're going to need a bigger lab." They worked in silence for the next few minutes. The beaker's contents slowly thickened, turning a deep rust red. It emitted a low hiss. At the 8-minute mark, Vril entered without announcement. His posture was unusually relaxed, though that still meant he looked like he was preparing to reprimand someone. "We've completed the psychological analysis," he said. The committee concluded the scream was a proportionate response within the human emotional spectrum. Parker raised an eyebrow. So I'm officially not a liability? You are a known quantity. That is marginally safer. Lessa stepped away from the console. We're beginning the last trial now. Capsaicin concentration at 35%. Simulated mucosal lining calibrated to average human sensitivity. Vril watched the chamber activate. A small plume of vapor rose from the containment unit. The sensors immediately began logging data. 30 seconds in, the lining began to secrete a thick film. 60 seconds in, temperature readings jumped by 2 degrees. At the 2-minute mark, the lining began to twitch rhythmically. This is the same reaction we observed in the biological sample from Parker's biopsy, Lessa said. The tissue doesn't retreat. It braces. Vril leaned forward. You're saying the human body doesn't avoid the source of pain. It prepares for it. Not with conscious input either. It treats the irritant as a challenge, not a threat. Parker scratched the back of his neck. You ever study boxing? Vril didn't answer. It's a sport, Parker continued. 2 people hit each other until one of them can't get up. The good ones don't flinch when the punch comes. They lean into it. Take the hit so they can counter. Vril's brow furrowed. That sounds barbaric. It's strategic. Just like this. My throat didn't curl up and die. It dug in. Lessa folded her arms. Your species has evolved to treat adversity as a form of stimulus. Pain becomes instruction. Discomfort becomes data. Something like that, Parker said. The console beeped 3 times. The trial had completed. Stabilization achieved, Lessa confirmed. No structural breakdown. No necrosis. Simulation complete. Vril tapped the edge of the console. Then the classification request will be updated. Capsaicin-based substances are no longer considered toxic to humans, but categorized under voluntary adversity ingestion. Parker coughed. That's the most bureaucratic way anyone's ever described lunch. Vril straightened. You will be required to sign a waiver before consuming any further non-standard items. The ship's medical insurance does not extend to culinary recklessness. I've already signed 3 forms just to get salt. You'll sign a 4th. Lessa closed the containment chamber. We're done here. The sample will be archived and the mock tissue will be preserved for comparative studies. You're free to go. Parker stood and stretched. So that's it? We're calling this chapter closed. Vril nodded. The scream incident has been officially resolved. All medical data logged. Scientific interest satisfied. Parker glanced toward the refrigeration unit. Can I at least get my sauces back? No, figures. He left the lab, walking slowly through the corridor toward the habitat ring. The artificial gravity shifted slightly as he passed the central junction. The lights dimmed subtly to indicate rest cycle. He reached his quarters and stepped inside, the door sealing behind him. The room was still sterile, slightly too quiet. A small container sat on the table. He hadn't seen it before. He opened it. Inside was a single ration bar and a folded note. It wasn't written in any language, but he recognized the formatting. A standard Tarshan data slate with a single line of translation beneath. Cultural exchange approved. Mild option. He opened the bar. It smelled faintly of something sweet. He took a bite. The flavor was odd earthy, with a tangy edge. Not spicy, just unfamiliar, but pleasant. He sat back, chewing slowly, and stared out the small viewport at the stars beyond. He had screamed. They had listened. And now, somewhere in a database, his pain was a footnote in an interstellar culinary archive. He finished the bar and leaned back, full for the first time in days. Whatever came next, at least nobody thought he was dying anymore.